you this morning at the Lanham Center. Welcome you. I think we've had 2 or 3 of these this year, and we thought it was about time to have another one. And we thought, well, they've had a legislative special session. They can tell us all about what went on in the session and bring us up to date on any other governmental affairs going on in the state of Tennessee. And we're just really fortunate and lucky, I think, to have the Speaker of the House of Representatives here, Cameron Sexton. I don't think he's been here in some time, and we certainly welcome him to Dyer County. And appreciate you taking time to come down this morning. Let's speak. If you would, let's all stand and ask all cards to lead us in prayer. You can just remain standing and we'll have the pledge of allegiance. Paul?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this another beautiful day, for life and set today in this field. We thank you, Lord, for the freedom we have to be together for meetings like this, to share information. And Lord, we just thank you for the leadership of this county, of this state, Lord. We thank you for the dedication to these men and women. We pray for your guidance, we pray for your blessings, and we give you thanks. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take a seat, please. I think in the process this morning, what we'll do is call on our representatives, of course, Rusty Grills and Chris Hurt, who represent, well, Chris is not exactly our representative, but he's an adopted representative for Dyer County. And I want to certainly express the regrets for Senator Jackson, who called and said he could not make it today because he's chairman of the Senate Corrections Committee, and they're having a very serious thing going on, and they need some discussion with the commissioner this morning, so he was not able to attend today, so he called and expressed his regrets, and we're sorry that he's going to be here. The first thing I want to do this morning, I think, before we get to the speaker, is let our representatives make a couple of comments. Rusty and Chris, and Rusty, you want to go crank it up, and I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes, that's all, okay? Can you do that?
Sure. I am a Baptist, so we get long-winded from time to time. Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Bob and the Chamber, for putting it on, for everyone showing up on a Friday morning. I know this is exactly the way you wanted to begin your weekend. But we did have a special session, and we're going to talk about that, but I know there's going to be a lot of questions about it. Early on, when the governor announced he wanted to have a special session, I put a group together with us. Obviously, I don't do anything up there in the House of Representatives, up the Speaker, knowing about it. I talked to his office and said, hey, we got some guys that like to put together. We put about 20 folks together in a room. We started working on ideas and different concepts. Met with the judges here, and we come up with some different ideas. I think we had about 15 different ideas that come out of that working group. We didn't get those passed, but we got those moving. We ran some of them and we killed some of them. Those things are things that we started working on back in June, and we will carry it we will continue to work on those until this next legislative session starts. And at that time, we'll start working on the rest of those particular issues. But we come today just to hear what you would like us to do in this next legislative session. Obviously, there's going to be some questions that would be directed at the Speaker and how he'd like to see things as far as the state. Chris Hurt here is my roommate as well. He serves in education, so he's got all your education questions. I serve in the Ag Department and the Civil Justice Department, so if you've got those questions, ask Chris Steele. But I do appreciate the opportunity, and Mr. Bob, I really appreciate you. Mr. Bob and I kind of got to where we talk all the time, but I appreciate Mr. Bob putting this together so we can come down here and just chit-chat with our constituents.
Thank you, Chris.
Morning. Great to be here, as always. I do claim to be Dyer County's favorite adopted son, so I always appreciate the invite and opportunity to be here. Again, I represent the 82nd District, which is Lauderdale, Crockett, part of Gibson, and part of Obion counties now. But just to touch on special session, like Rusty said, I'll just be frank with you from the beginning. I was not a fan. I didn't feel like we needed to be there. I signed a letter to the governor stating we didn't need to be there. We were in our small group meeting. I told the governor I didn't think we needed to be there. Regardless, we were called in, we had a job to do. So we went in and we debated bills, we discussed them, and we voted on bills the House did. Let me say that. The House, we had some good discussions and took some hard votes on things that I think will benefit Tennesseans. Again, I thought those things could be done in the spring, and now they will be done in the spring. And like Rusty said, we had some good discussions, and a lot of those bills that are going to be beneficial to Tennesseans and their safety got traction. We started the discussions and they started moving. At the end of the day, we didn't get a lot across the finish line for various reasons that may be discussed today, may not be discussed. But, we did go up and spent about a week and a half there and had some good discussions that I think in the long run, maybe by the end of the next session or even the next, possibly the way things work sometimes, depending on if we're reelected. But, will be beneficial to Tennessee. And so anyway, it's great to be here. I always appreciate the opportunity and to be here and to speak to all of you. So I'll turn it over to Speaker Sexton.
Thank you, Chris. Let me make a couple comments about the speaker, if I could, before he takes the microphone. He's been the speaker of the House since 2019. He's been re-elected. He's from I call it Plateau Country, Crossville. He's been in the legislature for a number of years. He's offered a lot of leadership in committees as he's come up through the ranks in the House. And he's, in my opinion, he's established some decorum and discipline in the House that was really needed over the years in this last session, and I commend him for his leadership. He is a great leader. We hadn't had him down here in a while, and we certainly appreciate him coming back this day. And so, Speaker Sexton, we'll give you the microphone.
Mr. Bob, I'm going to interject here. I forgot to say something. I know Rusty will echo my sentiments as we talk about Speaker Sexton. We came in, or I was elected in 2018, and kind of had a circus with a lot of the things going on and kind of some stuff going on there. And we had to make a move and remove the previous speaker, and that's when Speaker Sexton was elected. So I'd like to say that he brought level-headedness, a steady hand to the House. I'll say this, he has said from day one, and I truly appreciate this, and I was brand new to politics and everything in Nashville, but he always said from day one, vote your conscience, vote your district. And from a leader, hearing that from a leadership standpoint as a member, that's huge. And he said that from day one, he stands behind it. So anyway, I meant to mention that in my comments before, but truly appreciate him and making the effort to come through West Tennessee when he does to visit with our constituents.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Oh, there we go. I'm going to lean to you. I like you, Chris. Let me just say, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for hosting this, and it's good to have representatives like Rusty and Chris in Nashville. It does make my job easier. There's only a couple I got to pay attention to, as y'all probably know, so these are not having to pay attention to all of them is a beneficial thing. But what they do for you and what they represent says a lot. And I say this when I go places, and I'm serious, is most of the members in East Tennessee don't come to West Tennessee. And so they don't get to see you. What they do see is they see him, since y'all are from here, or they see Chris, and that's who they see as your representative. And so how they act, how they are, how they conduct themselves comes back to you. And so what you have in these two are two very good people who people believe in, who they trust, who they'll work with. And the best thing is when they stand up to say something, people listen because they respect what they're going to say. And so that makes my job easier. Look, as Chris said, as Speaker, I'm okay with people voting against bills. I'm okay with people voting for the bills. I'm okay with people standing up and railing against bills. All we say is just let us know where you are. So you need to vote how you need to vote. You need to vote for your district. And as long as that's all good, it all works out. Because legislation is about working together to get it to the best place possible. And so if you feel comfortable that you can vote yes or no or have an open discussion to get that piece of legislation into a point where you can support it based on what you know from your constituents, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, then we're better off as a state. And so that's what we try to do in the House, and I think we've been pretty successful. I will say, from my standpoint is being Speaker, I'm only Speaker because of these people right here beside me. I'm elected as state representative back in Crossville and part of Putnam County, and so that gives me an opportunity to serve. But I serve at the discretion of the members of the General Assembly. That's who my bosses are. Sometimes they'll kid around and say that I'm their boss. I am not. They are technically mine. They can vote for me or not vote for me to be Speaker. And so as I look at what I try to do is I try to grow into the speaker's job, is look at, travel the state, talk to a lot of people, talk to members, and see what that vision of where we want to go. And so what I see, if you're looking at special session, and a lot of stuff that we did in the House came out of a working group and other people who took it seriously to have those conversations. And so when people start talking about red flag laws, we weren't going to pass it. That wasn't the right direction to go. Protecting your constitutional rights was what we wanted to do. But there are things that we could do that would have aided in the situation that happened in Nashville with the school shooting. And so the House, I think we ended up having 20, 25 bills that came to the House floor that we worked on in committee, that got debated, that we think would have made an impact and also moved our state forward without limiting someone's constitutional rights that you have. And so we're hopeful to go back in January. We've already done the work in the House, so we kind of know where we are. We know where the votes are. We know what the legislation is. We might try to amend it or do a little tweaks to it. But we know where we need to go. There may be some additional stuff there. And so a lot of it was centered around mental health, obviously. A lot of mental health concerns. And so when you start looking at mental health and you start looking at K through 12 education, what you do see is all these issues combined. So it's not just one bill will not fix any problems that we have. But if you're looking at what happened at Covenant and where the breakdowns were, is when you look at individuals who want to do that kind of harm, they're not making that judgment on the day of or a week before. It's been months and it's been years in the making. And it starts with having resources in the school which will be able to handle people who are in crisis or have anxiety, and providing crisis intervention to individuals who come across those people, which would help diffuse situations. And we also know that if you look at health, you have adverse childhood experiences, which is the negativity part of if they come from a broken family, if they've been abused, if they've been this, there's a score. The higher your score, the more likely we know that you will have lower health scores or do something else. We also know if you don't graduate K through 12, we know what happens. More than likely you're going to be visiting the sheriff or the police chief or the jail at some point in your life, right? So we do know that as well. And so as we're looking at how do we look at this is when you look at the individual, a lot of times the individual comes from a broken home. It comes from an abusive home. And so there's trauma on top of it. So you have all these things working against you. And so going over and saying all we need to do is take away the Second Amendment right of somebody does not solve the problem in the future. And that's the point, right? But it's good to have people who will stand up and make that comment and have those tough discussions. Because those discussions will matter in 10 to 20 years. And so when you have a prosecutor and you have a judge who is willing to hold people accountable in the law, that goes a long way too, because that's part of it. And so when you have kids who come from an abusive family, and a lot of times when you go back and you look at all the school shooters, you see an individual whose dad more than likely was abusive to their mother and to them. And that trauma has led to a lot. That's why it's important that we do the best to handle the domestic violence situations. And sometimes you do have to move that male out of that household because the long-term effect is detrimental. And so at the same time, you also have a K-12 system where you have people with crisis intervention, where you have guidance counselors who should be guidance counselors, where we maybe have to put in psychologists or other social workers to help individuals overcome those issues. Because now what we've known is you have adverse childhood experiences, which are the negative, and now you have what is called benevolent childhood experiences, which are the positive. And what is the positive aspect of it? Do you like school? Do you have friends? Do you have an adult you can talk to? Because what happens is you have a family of 4, and some of these shooters, when you look at their family, The first one is the shooter, the second one has criminal history, the third one has a job that they've been holding down, and the fourth one is a successful entrepreneur. So they all interact differently. So you can't just say that all four are going to be effective. And so you really have to make a determination on how each individual person handles that and give them the resources that they need to be successful. And so that's why when you look at these issues, and when we looked at the house, that's why we came back with 15 or 20 different things. Because it takes a lot to help us get through this situation. So we can take the hard road, which is having those conversations about how we help people with mental illness and trauma and overcome those, and abusive families and not finishing school, and by third grade retention and third grade proficiency is important in our state, because that's the pinnacle of success. Think about it. Third grade in our state is the pinnacle of proficiency for a student. If we don't fix it, by 8th grade it's even less. So that's why it matters what happens in third and what happens in K through 2. So I look forward to having questions. I see this microphone doesn't like you. I look forward to having the questions. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Listen, no subjects off. I tell everybody every time. No subjects off limits. Anything you want to talk about, we are happy to have that discussion, because truly, you have two people here, plus me, who are willing to work to accomplish things that will make our state better and continue to allow our state to lead other states. So thank you.
Hey, I want to make one point. He brought up he was talking about the mental health issue. And one of the working groups, that group that I put together, we brought the Department of Mental Health in. And before COVID, 18% of Tennesseans had mental issues. As soon as COVID's over, now we're looking at 1 in 3. 33% of Tennesseans are suffering from some type of mental issue. We have a mental issue, a mental health issue problem, or mental health problem, however you want to word it, here in Tennessee. So we are very aware of that as a state legislature. And we're doing everything we can to put money in the right places to get those assets to combat that. It does not reach all of them.
Don't really have a question, but I wanted to thank you, gentlemen, for all you've done for Tennessee. Governor, town, we appreciate it. Particularly as applies to highway work, Forge Well, good work that's gone on out there. 51 right through Dyersburg, across these two bridges that need to work for 40 years. We appreciate you. And let's don't forget 210, Highway 210, from the 4-lane over to 51. It's a few miles, and I may have talked to y'all a half dozen times, but it really needs it. It's busy because the trucks use that now. When they bypass Dyersburg on that side, 4-lane, 412, and then bam, over to 51. Thank you again for all you've done. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And what I'll say to that is 13 years ago, it was about 13 years ago, Governor Haslam came in with the first Republican House. We already had the Republican Senate. And then you had the constitutional officers that did the state funding board. And so the philosophy of state government changed a little bit. Not saying the previous ones did not have a similar philosophy, they did. But what you saw with Governor Haslam is the first things he started doing is cutting the budget that was running too high and we're running deficits. Got the funding board estimations back down to where they should be, which was realistic. And then he started looking at business reforms. And so he realized very quickly that we don't generate revenue by raising taxes. A lot of times, Art Laffer is right, it actually diminishes the revenue. And so he started doing the things that allow businesses to thrive in our state. And so we continue that under Governor Lee. And so Governor Lee this year, for small businesses, we did a big tax cut for franchise and excise. Saved small businesses close to $70 million a year in our state. And then he's invested in technical schools. But what we have done is you start seeing the surpluses. And what people will say is, oh, we're over collecting in taxes. We're paying too much in taxes. Well, we've cut over $1 billion in taxes. So it goes back to a philosophy of allowing you to grow your business without government intervention for the most part, lowering taxes so that you will keep more money, which then means you can save it, invest it, or spend it. And our sales tax, we've been hot, so there's a lot of things that came in. We passed the internet sales tax to equal the level playing field for small businesses in Tennessee, which instead of buying out of state, now it's level, you pay the same tax. And what we've had is we've had surpluses because we underestimate our growth. It'd be really easy. We could sit up there in Nashville and say, we think we're going to grow 9%, and we have $0. And we're like, see, we're doing great. But when you estimate 9%, you're going to put 9% back in the budget. And so what we do is we say, well, we think we're going to grow 3.5%, 4%. We're okay with getting a 6% growth and only budgeting for 3.5%. Because what does that do to your point? It allows us to take a lot of that money that we've been taking and do one-time funding for roads, for bridges. That's why we don't have any debt on roads. We owe Lamar Alexander a gratitude for not putting us in debt. That was his decision back when he was governor. And so this year, with their help in the governor, he proposed $750 million in each of the 4 regions for TDOT. Never happened before in our state. So there's a lot of things now, because we have our budget under control, we're living with our means, our revenue is such that we can go into rural communities and invest in infrastructure, whether it's water, sewer, roads. I know there's some waterways to the west where they want some ports and stuff. But it gives us the opportunity to do things that we never thought we could do. And to partner with rural mayors and rural counties to allow them to grow without feeling like they have to raise taxes to achieve it. And so we appreciate your kind words. It just kind of goes back to the whole philosophy of where our state has gone in the last 12 years.
But if you don't mind expanding on that, because the articles out there are saying we're not hitting budget estimates right now, based on how you budgeted, but y'all are still okay the way you spent the money. You talked about the one time.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Bring everybody up to speed as to how it's going to work.
Yeah.
The state's not in a bad situation when they see that the budget estimates aren't getting where you want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, this last budget year, I think we had $4 billion of recurring money. And so under Governor Haslam, is even when we had excess revenue, he did not spend it all. And so you have some money that's reoccurring, which is, I would view it, it's kind of like your paycheck. So you expect your paycheck to be recurring, right? And then you have non-recurring, which is like your bonus money. Some people live at like it's recurring, but it's not recurring, it's non-recurring. And so those are the 2 forms of revenue that comes into our state, recurring and non-recurring. And so the recurring funds, we've never spent, so say we go back 6 years and it was $1 billion of recurring money. We might have spent $500 million as recurring and took that $500 million to the point and put it into bridges, which is one-time expenses, or into higher education, or into TCAS or capital projects. So that $500 million comes back the next year because it's recurring, but we didn't spend it. So the next year we have $2 billion of recurring. And so it's like we're compounding the money, and we started using it as one time because we were a little afraid of the national economy going south. And we didn't want to set ourselves up for failure. But we also knew there's a lot of things if we had money that we could do one time that would help farmers, that would help rural communities, that the governor has made a priority to really put us in a place to be successful and do things to set us up for long-term success. So if the economy does drop, we are able to handle it. And so the other thing I'll say is when Governor Haslam came in, we had $150 million in the rainy day fund, kind of like your savings account. $150 million. That's not a lot of money. I think it would run state government for about 6 hours. And in the 12 years, we're up to about $1.6 billion. And so there's a lot of people too who will say, oh, look at how much they're spending now. When you put money into the savings account, that's spending. That increases your budget. So we've increased our budget by $1.5 billion simply by saving money. So you have to look at that as well when you're looking at the budget. So even if revenue projections are off, and we're only like minus 0.3%. I think this last month we were $3 million off, which is fine because what happens when businesses start seeing inflationary, people start holding their money a little longer. And so businesses don't have as much inventory. They're trying to not spend so much, which affects franchise and excise. You have sales tax, people may cut spending for a little bit. We also gave a 3-month sales tax relief on groceries for August, September, and October. So that has an impact, because we could misestimate what we think that will be. More people are taking advantage of it than maybe we thought, so that would show a decrease in sales tax. But we are positioned, based off our budget right now, where that's not a huge impact to us. And actually, it keeps us a little bit more lean, but we will still have one-time money coming in the next budget, maybe just not more recurring than what we had in the past.
I want to bring up something you, Speaker. Ms. Slater and I have spoken to this, Stephen and I talked about this before. ECD and how they appropriate funds for future expansion. As they look at the amount of jobs that are going to be created, not necessarily the economic impact. And I know this year we've got I call it the Ag ECD fund, it's at there about $15 million in the Department of Ag. And that is a huge asset for the Department of Ag to have, because there are agriculture businesses and industry that can be brought to especially rural parts of the state, that will expand existing markets, and the economic impact will be huge, but it doesn't create a lot of jobs, so ECD doesn't have the necessary tools in their toolbox to go out and recruit those jobs, or even help get those industries established here in West Tennessee or any other part of Tennessee. So that's paramount that we keep those funding dollars in that fund, and if not, expand them. Would you disagree, Slater?
No.
Thank you.
That was a setup.
Chris?
This is kind of more of a statement than a question, but it's related to the covenant shooting. So I think we can all agree that SROs are one of the best things that we can do to protect kids in school, aside from all the other issues that bring about somebody that will do that kind of thing. And it's my understanding that out of this is there's going to be money for SROs for schools. What I wanted to bring up is here in Dyer County, we have 3 church-affiliated schools, Methodist, Baptist, and Presbyterian, so CCA right across the street. One of the things that, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the ironies of this is I feel like the Presbyterian church-affiliated school shooting in Nashville covenant, and we have a Presbyterian-affiliated school across the street. I think the irony of it is that there's going to be a lot of money flowing to schools for SROs, but I don't think there's going to be any SROs for church-affiliated schools. So a little bit ironic, but I just wanted to see, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we did appropriate some money for private schools. It wasn't directly for SROs, it was for safety. And so the private schools could spend that how they want to. So if some already had SROs, then they could get it for hardening the schools. And so I can't remember the exact number of it. I think it was 25 million or so, I think, that we put towards private schools. And then we came back in special session, and we didn't do anything for higher education, which was important, because you start talking higher education, which is likely is probably more than a K through 12, if you look at the trend of history. So we put money towards higher education as well as securing campuses. But we did do some for private. I think we'll see if it needs to be more. There's a lot of private schools out there. But we'll see how that works out. The SRO, the interesting thing about the SROs is the amount of people who think SROs, it's a vocal minority, are bad. They see SROs as bad. And I know in Crossville, we've had SROs who have stepped in when someone was trying to think about suicide. They've stepped in when someone was trying to sell drugs or something else. The SROs are not just there as a person who carries a weapon. They are there as part of the school, and their role is a lot bigger than simply being an armed person on campus. And I think it's unfortunate that some see that. I think it's more political rhetoric on their part, because they're like, it looks like a prison. Well, the SRO